Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Healed, where we welcome you in as a community. We discuss the hard stuff. Today, we want to invite you to take a stroll or a journey into the rabbit hole with us. Trigger warning, we are going to be discussing pedophilia, sexual abuse, attraction towards minors. What is the psychology? What is the thinking? What contributes to this sort of behavior? Is it a behavior? Is it a personality disorder? Is it a psychological, a mental illness? Is it what is it really about? Ruth and I have come to realize that there is a lot of education that needs to be had around this topic so that we can begin to contribute to being part of the solution and not the problem. There is a lot of stigma associated with pedophilia, or what some would consider themselves to be minor attracted people. And they just hide. At this stage in humanity's process, in our journey collectively, we are nowhere near understanding how we can begin to prevent this type of attack towards children, sexual assault and violence towards children, which affects the women in our community and the men in our community. So we've decided that we want to create a safe space where we tell these stories and we open up the platform to begin to have the discussions, because avoidance, ignorance, and pretending that it's not there, just like, as a psychic medium, when I talk about negative attachments and demonic spirits and stuff like that, people like to say, I don't believe in it. And I say, what do you mean? Do you believe it doesn't exist? They say, no, I know it exists, but I don't want to believe in it. I don't want to hear anything about it because then I won't be affected by it. That's the biggest misconception. Not knowing, turning a blind eye and being ignorant to it because it's a hard conversation to have contributes to the problem. So once again, I'm going to say trigger warning. If you've experienced sexual abuse, sexual assault, or rape as a child, or as a woman, or as a man, check in with yourself. If you're not ready for this conversation, if you're not ready for this journey into understanding what it is that contributes to the makeup, they're just normal people living amongst us. And avoiding this reality often makes us complicit. So if you're ready for this conversation, we welcome you to join us. But if you are not in a good space and emotionally you're just not there, save this video, come back to it when you're ready. There is no judgment here. But if you have the courage to stick around for a little bit, we want to thank you, because together we can begin to understand who these people, these members of our community are, and what it is we need to be aware of, and how it is we can shift our attitudes to become part of the solution. What is it that we look out for? And how is it that we begin to be open to recognizing family members that might struggle with these very same challenges, to then be able to protect the children in our lives? As I said, we're going down the rabbit hole with this one. So if you're going to stick around, we want to thank you and we want to honor you. If you're not in the mental space, emotional space, maybe sit this one out, save the video, and come back later. Check with your therapist, check with your advisors, check with your spiritual coach, check with whoever it is that is your support group. But most importantly, check with your body. If the topic, your body's going to communicate with you. If the topic activates a nervous system response that is uncomfortable, listen to your body. Thank you, Ruth. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Edith. Thank you so much for that powerful introduction into our topic today. How are you doing, Edith?
I'm doing good, just to be able to be here and to know that we have created this space not only for other people, but for ourselves, to be able to empower ourselves and to learn and to grow. And when you contribute to the solution for a problem, it's so healing. So I want to thank you for co-creating on this one with me. I'm feeling great about that.
It's an absolute pleasure. And just reiterating what Elif said, this is such a powerful topic. We are debunking some of the myths today around pedophilia. Historically, we've seen society see pedophiles as people who are condemned, as people who are inherently bad. And through today's case, we're going to be looking at someone who is self-aware. This is one of the most emotionally intelligent interviews that I've listened to in a long time. So we have someone who, by the name of Brandon, who has come out and he has shared his story of being a pedophile. He lives in the United States, and we're going to be leaving a link below so that you can go and listen to this powerful interview with Dr. Kurt Honda and Brandon. And Brandon has his own channel as well on YouTube. So go and he has amazing tools that he uses in his day-to-day life. So we're going to leave all the links below. It is really powerful. And through this interview, we can see that not all pedophiles act on the attractions that they encounter. Now, that's an uncomfortable truth, but it's a necessary one to acknowledge on this topic if we want to create a safer, more informed society. So we're going to be exploring through the story of Brandon. And this is featured in Psychology in Seattle. So that is the name of the podcast. So go and check it out on YouTube. And the name of the cast is Interview with a Pedophile Father. So we're going to be leaving those links below, but Brandon's story highlights the importance of self-awareness, impulse control, therapy, and the moral responsibility of those who live with these attractions, but they choose not to harm. And this is what Brandon reiterates in his story. So we're going to hop into a timeline to start off, just to give us some perspective on Brandon's story. So Brandon, like I said, he's from the United States. And between the ages of 11 and 12, he began to sense that he's different from his peers at school. But he didn't have the language at the time to describe what he was feeling. But he knew that he was different. And he tried to write it down. He tried to make notes. He tried to talk to his parents. He came from a very religious background. And he knew that it was not safe to speak about these topics within his home. So what he did was he stayed silent, but he said in his own words, I was fully aware of what I was experiencing at the time. And I knew that it was not safe to tell my parents, especially my father, who was very religious. And I'm sure a lot of us can identify with Brandon's story. Coming from very, very religious backgrounds, what was allowed and not allowed. Elif, I don't know if you remember back in the day, if you brought a friend around who had sexual orientation of a certain kind, my parents would definitely say, don't bring them around here again. And I just want to give some perspective to the community that I come from. I was not allowed to engage with people of a different sexual orientation. Do you have an experience, Elif, as growing up?
Well, I do have an experience slightly different to yours where it wasn't even addressed. The people around me would just pretend that it doesn't exist, which I'm not sure if that's better or if it's worse, but there's definitely such a culture of total denial. I'm going to see you in the way I want to see you. That's going to be comfortable based on my religious beliefs. So I don't want to confront this. I'm just going to pretend that it doesn't exist. I don't see it. And I think in some ways that is almost worse because there's a total denial. You say, I just want to touch on something here quickly. You talk about being able to identify with a very, very deep understanding that there are certain things that are just not going to be tolerated. There are certain things that there's no space for. And very much us being taught, and I'm sure you can identify with me, I was very much taught this is what good people do. So the moment you identify something within yourself that doesn't match what good, so not good people, because my early family, my early childhood, I was raised by different homes. So in my early childhood, I was with my biological maternal family, and it was very much the narrative of this is what Christians do. In other words, only Christians are good people, and this is what they do. And anybody that does anything other than that, they're not good. So there was no space for, and I had an experience on Saturday at a family funeral where a topic came up, and I was like, but I don't agree with that. Nobody asked, oh, what do you think? It was just, well, it's about the Lord, and that's all that matters. Like, are you serious? Are you serious? So that very much shut down. And you are able to identify with that feeling of anything that is not associated with what we've prescribed as good should be shameful. I just want to acknowledge that there are going to be so many people listening to this podcast, to this, and watching this YouTube video that are for the first time in their lives going to even consider having any likeness in experience to a pedophile, because we as a society have not spoken about pedophiles as though they're humans. If you have a pedophile in your home, you will rather deny the fact that that's even a possibility, no matter who it harms, because you cannot recognize that this is my brother, this is my husband, this is my son, and pedophiles are considered to be subhuman.
Absolutely.
You know that pedophiles are monsters, and now you're realizing, oh my goodness, I have attractions, I have characteristics that might make me one of those. Am I even human?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Edith. That is so powerful. Absolutely beautiful. Yes. And we can see that there are different factors that come into effect when recognizing these patterns, when looking at this specific topic, and the role that certain, like religion, for example, plays in creating shame from a very young age. But back to Brandon, he felt shame at a very young age. We just went through ages 11 through to 12, where he began to sense that he is different. But like we just said now in the discussion, he was not able to voice that because there was a great amount of shame within his home. There was a lot of things going on. At age 17, so a couple of years have passed, he realized that he was sexually attracted to children. And this was primarily for...
I need to just ask you a question, because when you say at age 11 to 12, he noticed he was different. I'm just wondering if he was aware of the fact that what was his, because certainly at 11, 12, he's also a minor. So if he's attracted to minors, that would seem normal. What was the difference he noticed because I can see how at 17, he would then realize, oh, I'm still attracted to much young kids that are way, way, way younger. And maybe then it coming to this realization with absolute clarity that, okay, this might be a thing. But at 11, 12, was he specify what he noticed was different?
Brandon did not have the language at the time to articulate that. He was very clear on that. He wanted to give it a voice, and he wanted to say, this is what I'm feeling, but he didn't have the words specifically to articulate what he was feeling. At age 17, he looked back and recognized that what that feeling was that he was sexually attracted to children, specifically boys, primarily boys. And he also noted that he was gay, but he could not say this. He could not voice it. And then things started to make sense for Brandon. So around the age of 17, Brandon felt really overwhelmed with shame. Because like we mentioned earlier, he came from a very religious background. And not only did he feel shame about his pedophilic attraction, but also due to the lack of acceptance of homosexuality within his community. So he felt like he had absolutely nowhere to go. And then let's fast forward to his early 20s. So now Brandon is beginning to explore online forums and communities. He's given a voice to what he's been feeling since he was a child. And he also isolates himself emotionally. And he said this was a very, very important point in isolating himself, because then he had time to process what he was feeling emotionally. He experienced severe depression during this time, even to the point of suicidal ideation. So he had suicidal tendencies because he couldn't express what was going on. And then in the mid-20s, Brandon became a father. So he met someone special, he became a father, and this is the moment for Brandon where his fatherly instincts kicked in. He was so protective of his children, and he made a conscious choice to be a good father and not a predator. So he could articulate what he was feeling. He was still attracted to children, but that becoming a father was a turning point in his life. And this further solidifies his belief that attraction does not equal action. So at this point in his life, Brandon decided, I'm not ever going to act on this. There has to be some way to manage what I am feeling. And this is where Brandon's journey began in terms of therapy and support. So he sought out professionals who did not judge him, first of all. He emphasized that finding non-stigmatizing support was life-changing. And he used techniques like mindfulness, journaling, avoiding high-risk situations. He avoided high-risk situations. And he used masturbation to manage his attraction. And in the current day, Brandon finds himself, he's become an advocate. I'm just going to fast forward there. Brandon has become an advocate for honest conversations about pedophilia. He believes that early intervention, mental health support, and open dialogue are key to preventing abuse, not silencing people into shame. And like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the most emotionally intelligent interviews that I've listened to in a long, long time. Sorry, Elif, were you going to add something?
I was just thinking about some of the things that you mentioned. I'm sure many of our viewers are going to wonder how, whether what he says is true. You know, he's claiming that he's found this way. Can you really manage such a monstrous, evil tendency with mindfulness? Well, the judgment that it is monstrous and evil is comes from a lot of ignorance and a misconception. A healthy brain, we all have attractions, but just because I'm attracted to men does not make me automatically perverted behavior. There are many women and men who behave inappropriately based on their attractions. So just because you're attracted to someone doesn't mean you have the right to just act on those attractions. And many people have that idea, they have that mindset that because that this it's a healthy thing for men to behave the way they behave because they're just men. But when it's anybody else, there's a lot of judgment and stigma because it's been certain things have been made evil. I was just thinking, Ruth, about can you imagine being a kid, an 11, 12-year-old? At that age, you've already been told that people who are good and deserving of goodness, they're Christian. And people who are
No.
evil are everything else, right? So if your sexual orientation, if you're gay, then you've got the devil in you. And oh my goodness, if you're attracted to minors, even worse, you must be a demon yourself. So now you're wrestling with this. Do I deserve to be alive? Something is really wrong with me. And just imagine feeling that way. The horror, the dread of realizing that you have this affinity, this tendency that could be really harmful. And most people think that when you are attracted to children, you have no choice. Suddenly, you don't have free will because the devil's possessed you, so you must act on it. So the assumption is that if you're a pedophile or if you're attracted to minors, you are possessed and evil and you're going to do horrible things. So imagine how terrifying that is for a child. And where does he go?
Exactly.
Online.
Yeah.
As a child, your home is supposed to be a safe space. The adults in your home are supposed to have the intelligence, the information, and the knowledge to know what to do when you come to them with hard conversations. But how many of us have been too afraid to go to our elders with tough conversations? Most of us have been raised by the streets or by friends. And then when something horrible happens, someone else always gets the blame. It's not them because they're good Christians or they're good religious people, whatever their religion is, or they're good people. It must be your friends, or it must be something or someone out there. And I just want us to take a moment and to consider the human aspect of this. You come into this world, and there's a lot of things we don't choose. And isn't it interesting that there's this narrative, certain things you choose and other things, it's the devil. You don't choose it. It's the devil. Certain things you choose, but other things you don't. And so there's a lot of hypocrisy. And I'm just thinking of this little boy that realizes something quite horrific because of what he's been told. And he doesn't feel safe enough to go and speak to anyone in his life. He goes to an online platform. And can you imagine how dangerous that is? In his case, obviously. Now, I wanted to ask you a question just based on this. I think it's the audience, they're probably going to be curious. He becomes a father at 20. I think that maybe you want me to just share a little bit about the journey that leads him to this place where he makes the decision, because I'm sure there's going to be so much judgment. He discovers it when he's a teenager. He realizes he's gay and he gets clarity about the fact that he's attracted to minors. Why does he go and marry a woman and have children? When you traumatize, your brain can sometimes get stuck on certain details and ruminate there, and then you can't take in anything else. So I just want to give some clarity and shed some light on that.
Yeah.
So because he came from a religious Mormon family, for those of you who are not familiar with what that is, it's quite staunch, it's quite rigid, and they've got a set of beliefs that sort of separate them from the rest of Christianity. So, and their sense of being righteous and good is rooted in a lot of strict values and religious rules and practices. So, they often do missionary when they become of age. That is part of their faith, where their youngsters go and do missionary work around the world or in different parts of the world. And Brian thought that his faith would save him. That's what we've all been told, right? Just believe in this and trust God and trust and do the right thing, and you're going to be saved from this evil. If I consider my addiction an affliction from the devil, then it's something that's being done to me, which means I'm helpless to it. Until I take responsibility for an aspect of my behavior or who I am, I've got no control. I'm always going to see myself as reactive, as a victim to it, and as helpless in the situation. But nonetheless, this was his upbringing and his the teachings that have been passed down onto him. He decided that he would do the missionary work, and God would save him from being gay and from his attractions. And he also started therapy. So there were these schools, there were these missionary schools where kids who had behavioral issues, so this would be considered, being gay was considered a behavioral issue, and amongst other things. And he went to one of those schools. There are so many stories and documentaries about those schools when parents can't cope with their children because they are actually completely abandoning their responsibility as a parent because it's a tough subject, because they've decided that anything that doesn't fit into our box of what is good and what is holy is evil. And so we need to reject it. We're not going to give any energy to it. And they totally abandon their children and they send them to these behavioral schools where these kids have been abused. Many kids have been ended up dead. There are so many documentaries about this. But he was sent to one of those schools and there was a counselor there. And at one point he's mentioned to the counselor, so he thought he's going to be healed from being gay, and that it might also solve this other problem, because surely this is an affliction from the devil. And he mentioned to his counselor that he's attracted to very young boys. And the counselor turned around and said, maybe we'll address that at another stage. Even the counselor didn't have the emotional intelligence. Do you take the position as a counselor? And this is the issue I have with religious counselors, is that it must be about religion, and it must be about practices, and it must be about reinforcing the indoctrination, and it must be about reinforcing the programming. Anything outside of that, we're not addressing, we're not talking about it. And anyway, so I feel like that counselor, again, another area in which that could have gone really wrong. That could have gone seriously sideways. But nonetheless, throughout his life, he wanted to be good, holy, and what his family has told him that means, what it means to be a good man. So he did what any person that's decided their religion is everything and is going to be the thing that saves them, is he chose to do what his community told him is the right thing to do. And he got married. That's why he got married. And it was probably a scenario where this was a nice person, a good person, and he felt love for this person. And he felt like, I could make this work. But that deep denial of self, because a lot of people have judgment, even when people are gay, they get married, they're married for a couple of years, and then they decide, I can't keep up this facade anymore. And then the marriage falls apart, as it would, because imagine, I'm autistic, I know what it's like to mask. It is exhausting. Imagine pretending and masking every day of your life. It is the most painful thing, because you know no one's going to love me for who I am. And in this case study, there's a somewhat normal, healthy outcome. But just imagine, for those who are deeply traumatized, those who don't have this intellect, the self-awareness, those who have other psychological issues associated with their pedophilia, the outcomes are not so favorable. That's something I wanted to just touch on, because I know this is a tough conversation for some of us. We're looking at this scenario or this topic, this very, very challenging topic in our communities, from the perspective of the pedophile for the first time. And many of us are traumatized. Our brains can sort of get hooked into a particular aspect, and we won't be able to move beyond that. So I just want to acknowledge that. Then the other thing you mentioned was attraction does not necessarily equate to action. And I touched on that a little bit earlier on, where I was saying, in the healthy brain, in the healthy psychology, in the healthy spirit, and the person who has a healthy relationship with the emotional guidance system, attraction does not equate to action. Just because I'm angry doesn't mean I'm going to drive my fist through your face. If I'm doing that, then something is not healthy. But when it comes to people who have this challenge, we don't even consider that possibility, that if we're if we create more of a safe space for our children and our family members to be able to have these conversations and to have the support that they need, that they can also find themselves being able to have good impulse control. Attraction does not equal action. And there are many people who are challenged with this reality, who choose not to act out on their attraction. But can you for a moment imagine you and I having the desires that we have as human beings, growing up in environments where you're told masturbation is a sin, anything associated with sex is evil, and you don't even, and then feeling attraction for a man. Just imagine if in our society it was unacceptable. I'm not comparing the two, because an adult can consent, a child cannot. But how many adults do not consent? Even in marriage, some people think that when you marry, that's an automatic free pass forevermore. What about that man that had people pay him? He went onto a platform. There's a community of men. For those of you who don't know about this French woman's case, apologies, I don't remember her name now, but there is this woman whose husband, for years, he was on a platform with other men like him who get a kink out of having sexual intercourse with women who are asleep or who are not conscious. And you can think that's disgusting. What you think is irrelevant. The reality is that human beings are complex. We're not all the same. We have different affinities, different things that we're attracted to, different things that we like, and it's not going to make sense. Not everything that everybody else likes is going to make sense. But in order for us to live together in harmony, we have to remember we're a community. Even those who we don't understand, we have a responsibility to have some level of understanding. If we don't, we're part of the problem, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And maybe if we can begin to realize that it doesn't mean that because they have these tendencies or they have this form of attraction, that they're automatically going to be this monstrous predator that's going to harm children and rain terror, that they can make healthy choices. Then maybe that stigma can be removed and we can stop being ignorant and in denial when we have family members or people in our community that either we're going to be in denial and say, this is not true, he didn't do it because he's my son or he's my husband, or I'm going to be in denial about it, or let's lynch him on a tree. Like, you know?
Absolutely. I think that is so powerful. Thank you, Ella, for touching on those 2 points. And I just want to let our viewers know Brandon is still married to the mother of his children, and they've got more children now. And they are very, very happy. And she is 100% aware of everything. He's put that out there. So they are still married. But very, very powerful statement that you made there. He entered into a heterosexual relationship with a woman, not out of sexual attraction, and he's admitted that, but likely as a way to conform and suppress his true feelings that he had at that time. And as anybody, I'm sure we can all identify, he wanted to be accepted and avoid the shame and the stigma associated with same-sex attraction, because like we discussed earlier, that was not an option in the community that he grew up. And becoming a father was not part of a calculated plan, according to Brandon, but rather a natural consequence of pursuing a relationship. And you made a statement there, Elif, about pedophilia and what it is. It is a sexual orientation. So this is something for people that are tuned in. It's not a choice that you can make. It's who you are. It's a sexual orientation. It's not a behavior. So clinically, pedophilia is defined as a persistent attraction to children, not the act of abusing them. I just want to make that distinction there. It's not a psychological condition. It's not a crime. Acting on it is. And it typically begins in adolescence, as we saw with Brandon. He had an awareness, although he couldn't articulate and tell people about what his feelings were at the time. But between the ages of 11 and 12, he had an awareness. I have an attraction to children. And like you mentioned, the treatment for this, there is currently no cure for pedophilia. But mental health professionals, they aim to help individuals by controlling their impulses and avoiding offending. Now, I just want to share something from Brandon. He spoke out about how he manages those impulses. And from my perspective, that was really, really powerful. He uses cartoons. So these are animes for those who I had to go look it up. I did not know what that was. He uses pictures and masturbation, which he uses to control his impulses. The content that he uses, Brandon stated, is illegal in several countries, but this sort of content, it's not graphic. But he uses this to masturbate to and control his impulses. So these are one of the ways in which Brandon controls these impulses. And I thought it was specifically really important to touch on this because this is how he manages those impulses. And I'm sure we can all have a little bit to say about that. What do you think about that, Ela?
Okay, so the he uses content, right?
Mm.
And content
Cartoons.
is what is it called?
It's cartoons, so they're called anime.
It's animation, right?
Yes,
There's
yes.
actually there's a term for it. I can't think of it right now, but it's animation that portrays obviously characters performing pornographic acts, and in his case, the character would look childlike or have childlike qualities. And that's
Correct.
how he manages it and satisfies his sexual needs. Okay.
Yeah, that's his preventative tool.
Yes. So some might call it a preventative tool. I might say that because sexuality and sexual needs is unless you're asexual, and very few human beings are, especially for a man, it's a biological need. So what gets him off though is not necessarily it's not considered normal, obviously, but it is an animation. And to me, I feel like if it's not harming anyone and it's helping him to cope with his urges, we know that anything that is suppressed begins to own you. It becomes an obsession. So it's interesting to know that in some countries that's illegal. I can see why child pornography is illegal. A child cannot give consent to having their body, the images of them used in that way to satisfy somebody and to gratify somebody's needs. Children should certainly not be used in that way. But if it's an animation, it is not a child, and it is, as you say, a preventative measure. So I would think that is. I would consider that to be healthy. But people would just like I said, some people consider in this day and age, we would imagine that everybody is advanced and progressive and educated, and they wouldn't still consider masturbation to be an evil, negative thing. But we will still have those who have that mindset. So I suppose it depends on
Absolutely.
a person's opinion, but I don't see why it should be illegal if it's if it is if it is used as a preventative tool or something that doesn't actually harm anyone.
Hmm. It-
Because what would the
That's a
alternative
very good
be?
point. Absolutely. And I think those countries he mentioned are outside of the USA, so he has access to content. But it is definitely a preventative tool for pedophiles. Some of the points that I just wanted to run through from Brandon's interview that really struck out to me was that he recognizes his attraction, but he doesn't choose to act. And I think this is so powerful. Um, because he is essentially proving that control is possible with a proper support. And he's created support systems around him. So he stays away, like I said, from areas where there is children. He avoids pornography, which involves minors. Um, he's found legal outlets. I want to add it's legal outlets like the cartoons for sexual release. And he was able to separate his identity from the behavior. I think that is really, really important. Brandon recognizes that being attracted does not make someone a criminal unless they choose to offend.
I,
So he,
I agree with that. Absolutely. I agree
yeah,
with that.
yeah,
And some people are going to find the fact that he's attracted in the first place disgusting.
mm,
And that's fine, they can. It's their personal opinion. Um, but I totally agree with that. There are people, all human beings have all sorts of kinks and fetishes, and some will say, well, you can't compare this to a foot fetish. I will say, well, yes, I can. If someone's not comfortable with you using your if I'm not comfortable with you using my feet as an object of your fetish, then and you still do, it doesn't make it okay because it's just my feet,
mm,
right?
mm,
Um,
absolutely.
so I think it's I would go so far as to say I think Brian not acting on, and obviously this is what he says. And just like I'm going to assume that you've never sexually behaved inappropriately, that you've never behaved inappropriately with children
Mm,
or with other people from a sexual perspective, it's an assumption. I don't actually know that. I'm going to assume that when I meet you, I'm going to have the same assumption that because there's no proof and because um, he's not been arrested and nothing's come up with his kids, that the same thing goes there. I will go so far as to say that Brian not acting on his attraction is more commendable than a straight man who is not attracted to children not acting on that because it's not a desire for him, it's not an urge for him. You get what I'm saying? Well, it definitely it's really really something that I think deserves acknowledgement to make that.
absolutely. Yeah, he does not view himself as a victim at all. 100% agree with you. And it just shows the level of self-awareness that Brandon has. Even with his strong religious upbringing, he has made a choice. He's pro-intervention and he doesn't believe in secrecy. So that is why he's taken this opportunity on the podcast to talk about what he's been through and his journey. Um, and he ultimately believes that he's morally responsible, not only for his choices, but the safety of others.
Wow.
So for me, this case highlighted that not everyone with pedophilic attractions is a predator. Like I said, the choice to not offend, that is a distinction right there. But every individual with these tendencies, they have a responsibility towards society not to harm because the difference between thought and action is what defines safety, morality, and accountability in this conversation. Um, I just wanted to touch on something that I was reading in yesterday, where I had a look at a couple of countries. Here in New Zealand, we just recently introduced a sex register, which is going to become public, and I know Australia's done the same. And I just wanted to ask our viewers if they would think that this would be something good to have within the community. I know in South Africa there has been talks about it. Elif, can you maybe elaborate on that, on the registry, sex registry?
I'm not sure how
Sex
far they've
offenders.
gone with that, but I know there were talks on it, and I have reason to believe that they've implemented it. However, I'm not 100% sure if that's actually been done yet, because I know there were still some discussions. For me, I think in order for the registry to be of any benefit to us in a community, we've got a long way to go. I'll be honest with you, because we don't even have our system is not even at a place where many of these cases are even taken to where it's prosecuted. You can go and you can open a case, and they can just decide, because there's no witness, no one's willing to say, yeah, I saw it, or it's your word against them. Many of these cases don't even make it to court. There are many people who have these tendencies walking around. So we don't have a system that really makes I think in order for the registry to be for it to work and to be of any benefit, the system has to function. And I think in order for the system to function, communities need to be healthier. Right at the foundation is the community, and you're talking about Brian making the choice to be a healthy part of society. And I just want to say that is incredible for those of us who have the capacity to do that. And we would like to all believe that we have the capacity to make healthy choices. But if we did, then our societies wouldn't look the way they did, the way that they do. There wouldn't be so many mothers who are drug addicts at the moment if we had that capacity. Everybody's not. Both my brothers are severe addicts. And when I spoke to one of my brothers, I said, you don't have to think just because of where you come from that you have to, you can. And he looked at me and said, you don't get it. You're not normal. You're a superwoman. And it was the first time I realized that I'm expecting everybody to be the way I am and have my capacity. And it makes me really judgmental, because the reality is that a lot of us start out with, some of us are born with alcohol fetal syndrome. Some of us have trauma in the womb already. And I'm not saying I didn't have trauma, but some of us just we're built different to be able to cope with these things and persevere. Some of us have more of an affinity to what is unhealthy because it's just easier. So ideally, we would all have the capacity to make healthy choices. But the reality is there's a whole lot of components that contribute to who we become. And when you have psychological challenges, learning disabilities, your brain developmental issues, and mental health issues, and you have trauma, and you don't have the support, and I come from that. I've had to create my own tools, right? And so some can say, oh, great, Elif, we need more like you in the world. No, actually, we don't. We just need more people to understand that being human sometimes is really, really hard. So back to the registry. I'm not against it. I think it's great. But with where we are as a society right now, we're going to have people in our townships burning people's houses down. And many of us are going to say, good, they deserve that. But then why don't we just bring in the death penalty? And then when they're accused of, when it's proven that they've actually committed the crime of rape and sexual assault against children, why don't we just gas them? That's going to be more humane than put them out on the street. So there could be that debate. I'm just throwing things out there. Okay. because in our communities and our townships, people will be shunned, and some will be murdered and brutally attacked and blamed for all the issues that happen in the community. When there's parents neglecting their children and parents abusing their children, that person will become the scapegoat. And our system is just not, I always say rules are great if there are strong people that can enforce it. Rules in my home are great because I take responsibility for enforcing it. But I think that as a community, we've got a long way to go for it to even be something that works, because you've got to get onto that registry. And in order to get onto that registry, you need to be convicted. To get a conviction is a hell of a thing, I'll tell you that. It's a hell of a thing. And families are still prone to not disclose this information. I'd like to see us get to a place where we can sit down and everybody in the family knows that I've got a son that has this affinity. He's managing it, he's getting therapy, and everybody's aware of how he interacts with the children in the family, and they support him to not be alone or to not be in difficult situations, and when he's in a stressful place, to be supportive. We've got a long way to go as a community. I wanted to have my attacker convicted because as a child, my family didn't do anything. And the prosecutor said there's not enough evidence because the people who knew about it, that is my own aunt, my own family members, didn't want to make a statement. They were protective of him, some would say. She says, I know that you didn't want to send him to jail. She decided that for me because that's what she needs to believe, right? So many people might think that the offenders registry is the answer to the problem. Yeah, I'm saying that as a community, we're not in a place where this can be the solution to this problem. Not really. It'll help. It's certainly not gonna make things worse, but it's not going to turn this problem upside down on its head overnight just because we've got a sex offenders registry. There's been registries in the States forever. You still have on a daily basis crimes where kids are put into foster care and they're abused. Kids are adopted and they're abused. Kids, their own parents are abusing them. And what we fail to realize is that these things don't have, there's the stranger danger talk. Strangers, I begged as a little girl. My mother was an alcoholic. I basically raised myself. I was a free for all. It's not the stranger. It's not the stranger. It's the uncle. It's the stepfather. It's the person in the family. Most of the time, that's where it is. And the family do not want to acknowledge this problem, so they pretend it's not there. So how do you get a conviction? Unless someone catches this person in the act, and pedophiles are very, very clever. They are very, very clever. Yeah, this person needs to really have a serious condition, mental health illness, or something else going on that makes them clumsy. They hide these things very well, and the family make it possible for them to do these things because either they're busy with their own drama or whatever the case may be. So when it comes to the sex offenders registry, I think it's a band-aid, it's a plaster at this stage. It can be more, but we as a community and as a society need to realize that in order for any rule to actually benefit us with solving this problem, we need to be the ones that are positioned to allow that.
Absolutely. We do have a long way to go as a community, but getting there, I believe, is possible. I know it starts with courage, honesty, and the willingness to have these conversations and to face those hard truths. The registry, I believe that it's, on the one end of the coin, it gives employers, schools, and key organizations, a bit of transparency. And I think a lot more countries are getting to notice that. Like you said, it is a band-aid. It's not a solution. But like you mentioned, the other side of the coin is that there've been debates in certain countries about whether it should be available to the public, because there are concerns about vigilante justice and rehabilitation and privacy and all those things. So as a community, I think, one of the most powerful ways that we can start looking at a solution to this is shifting from silence to actually having these dialogues. I think that is so important. Like you mentioned, Elif, there is so much going on within our communities. There's so many people that have knowledge of, um, that behavior is not acceptable, but they choose to stay silent about it. When I look at, I'm sure everybody remembers back in the day we had the station strangler in Mitchell's Plain. And there were people in the community that noted his behavior was unhealthy. He was a teacher. I think his name was Norman Simons. But they decided to keep quiet. And only afterwards, when the trial was finished, did people come out and say, we noticed that there was certain things about his behavior that was not, like they said, normal about it. So, Elif,
Yeah.
did you want to?
Well, but going back to the registry, just because somebody is not on name is not on the registry does not mean that they don't have they are not a possible pedophile. They look like
Yeah.
us.
Yep.
When you have a particular way, you can mask. And every pedophile that talks about how they target. So today we did a case study on a non-offending pedophile. But
Yeah.
when you talk to pedophiles who have been caught because their behavior, they have offended to such an extent where it was so vulgar and so violent that they were actually caught, they will tell you they target specific types of people. And so the ones who are going to be on the registry are the ones whose behavior is so out of control and so careless that they make their way into the registry. But there are those who won't be careless. So that is why I say the registry is a band-aid. It's one part of it. When I say band-aid, it means we all have plasters in our house because we don't want the blood getting everywhere. I'm not saying a plaster has no value. But I just don't want people to think that the responsibility here is on the system creating some sort of list, because what they need to do is they need to convict that person. And most pedophiles don't get convicted because the people who are in the house who can say, well, there was something off. It is possible that this happened. It is possible because I wasn't home. Like in my case, I left her with him while I was working night shift, and I knew he had abusive tendencies. He's violent, he's abusive, and he's narcissistic. And perhaps it's possible. I wasn't there to see it, but perhaps it's possible. She wasn't willing to say that, and she knew why. She was protecting him. And so there are pedophiles that are not going to be convicted because they're going to go undetected. We need to be aware of the fact that they look like us, and that they're not going to say anything, even if they want help, even if they want to tell you, even if they don't want to hurt any children. They're not going to tell us because they're afraid of their houses being burnt down, being lynched, or not, The other thing I want to share with you is that I recently did a psychic reading for a client where it was shown to me that this person has been sexually assaulted in this very dysfunctional relationship, obviously groomed by her father for many years. And Spirit made it very clear to me: the family member must not confront this, because this will end up in a familiar side where instead of confronting this and healing this, they would rather end up dead. just because it's dysfunctional from your perspective doesn't mean that it's not normal for other people. And families, it takes, just like with addiction, it's a family disease. It takes a collective of dysfunction to keep this going. And when you think of that, I'm talking about root level. The registry is not going to be effective on that level until we begin to shine a light there and we begin to heal and to understand that we all are part of a problem. In this case, my client admitted to me, because it was a difficult conversation, a difficult reading to share, obviously, and she admitted, she said, my father had been fired from every school, and as kids we wondered why, and we asked my mom, and how do you get blacklisted in the state as a teacher? And I said, your mother knows.
Mm, mm, mm,
So what happens there, Ruth? That is a school who should file charges, but they probably don't want the trouble. They don't want their school to get a bad name, just like in Tuetue's case, where it's like, we don't want to end up getting closed down. A whole lot of people are going to, it's too much trouble. We rather get rid of this guy.
mm,
And
mm.
we just basically wipe our hands off of the issue. So
Yeah.
where does the registry come in there? That's what I'm
I think
saying.
it's a powerful tool that can be used, but shifting what you touched on there, shifting from that silence to dialogue, because we can't fight what we refuse to understand. So understanding pedophilia is really, really powerful. And I think that looking at a case like Brandon's is great. But like you said, on the flip side of the coin, there are those that are really, really intelligent, that know how to hide what they're doing. But Brandon, as we can see, he was really honest with himself from a very early age. He acknowledged what he was feeling. He was trying to get help through the counselor that also didn't provide him, but he kept going. So that is, there's two sides to the coin. And on the other side of the coin, we have predators who wish to remain unnoticed in society. And who does go unnoticed. And what is so powerful there, you said your client, the mother knew. The mother knew. And this is why breaking the silence without excusing the harm, it takes a lot of courage to do that, to talk openly about pedophilia. There is so much that goes on. I could just imagine they're in a family unit and what is going to happen. But to speak up is how we're going to start creating safer spaces within our community. And I can just imagine most people that are struggling with pedophilic thoughts must be absolutely terrified to ask for help. I'm sure they don't even know where to go. They fear judgment or prosecution, and we need more confidential therapeutic support.
Are those who don't think there's anything wrong with them because they're
Mm,
psychopathic or they're
mm,
sociopathic or there's some other condition that contributes to it. So I want to throw this out there. How do we get to a place where we're not totally depending on these dysfunctional people to do the right thing? In order for the registry to be something that we can feel confident about, we need to have the systems in place where
yeah.
the community gets the support and gets guarantees of certain protection, that there's a check-in, that there is some sort of accountability that this person has to be able to live in communities where there are kids, where when someone goes and reports an assault, it's not a matter of, is there anyone else that knows about this?
Mm,
Where
mm,
they're doing more to get a conviction, to have people held accountable, that if somebody has made a complaint, that there is more due diligence done for this person to be looked into. We don't even have systems in place where when you make a complaint about a child being neglected, they just go knock on the door. Oh, are you looking after the children? And then the person's obviously going to tell you what they want, what you want to hear. Okay, everything's okay. you can't take, like, maybe there should be a lie detector test that is like, there's got to be something else that we're implementing to be able to rule out any doubt that this person potentially could be, because their wife is probably going to protect them.
Yeah.
We'd like to live in a world where we're healthier, but we're all looking at people who have obvious issues as the problem in our society. They're not, we're the problem. Our denial and our ignorance and our codependence, because it's more important to us to have that partner. We don't want to be single and alone than for the children in our home or in our communities to be healthy. And so it's all good and well, but when somebody says this person has harmed me, and there's no one else that can come forward and say, yes, I know that happened, there's got to be more done. There has to be more done than just going to
Absolutely.
answer the questions and being like, yeah, no, everything's okay.
Yeah.
Because
And we can't heal pedophilia by pretending that it doesn't exist, which happens in a lot of the cases, or by throwing stones in the dark. By bringing it into the light and actually having those difficult conversations is the way that we create those safe spaces.
Ruth, what about having someone that is, whether it's a forensic psychologist or someone that is equipped, that has an expertise in this, to do an assessment,
Mm.
or and perhaps a lie detector test? What are the tools that we have available to us that can
Mm.
detect if someone's struggling with this, or there could be some sort of struggle and they're just too afraid to admit to it, for them then to get into for certain measures then to be put into place, if they've got foster kids in their home, for them then to be removed, or if they've, you know what I'm saying? Because as I say to you, sometimes the
Yeah,
children are protecting, the whole family's too afraid to say anything, and so there's got to be
absolutely.
just a registry that needs to be done. Otherwise, the registry is going to be of no use to us. I do have a question for you, though. You were speaking about the fact that he's happily married, and he obviously isn't attracted to his wife. A lot of people will find it really hard pressed to believe that people can marry for other reasons and be happy. Can you tell us a little bit
Mm.
more about that? Like, what was his wife's response to him coming out to her and sharing with her his truth? Did he share any
Okay,
of that?
so Brandon didn't share his wife's perspective, but
Okay.
he, despite living with these attractions, he decided to continue the marriage for the sake of his children, etc. And he really, what stood out to me is that Brandon values commitment, intimacy, and as we can see from his story, honesty is a big one for him. So he says that his marriage is not a mask or a cover up. He has children that he loves. They've got a beautiful family unit. But he didn't talk about his wife's perspective. His wife knows about his conditions. So this type of transparency is so rare. Like I said, this case is a 1 in a million. I just, like I said at the beginning, this is one of the most emotionally intelligent interviews that I've listened to in a long time. So, from my perspective, not everybody with this condition is a monster. As we can see with Brandon's case, some are deeply committed to doing the work on themselves, fighting that internal battle quietly but with conviction, because they refuse to become a predator or a perpetrator. They refuse to, they actually choose to take the high road and keep working on themselves. And for me, Brandon's marriage is just a reminder that humanity it's so layered. And healing doesn't always look like perfection. It looks like a choice. It looks like honesty and conscious living. And for me, that is what Brandon has chosen in this moment. Um, I just wanted to get back to what you said. It was so powerful. And The registry, I was reading about it, like I said yesterday, and this is one of the tools that society has decided to introduce. But there is so much that every country by country needs to go through. You know, you need to look at your legal and justice system, responding to that quickly, like you said, Elif, and fairly. I just don't want to talk about, you can respond to something quickly, but is there fairness in that? To ensure that perpetrators are held accountable, because justice delayed is justice denied, especially for the children. Then the other thing that I wanted to just touch on is I looked at several countries, and the mandatory minimum sentencing for offenders is absolutely shocking. For those who act on the attractions and actually harm children, I was shocked to see that so many countries there needs to be some sort of consistency and severity in terms of the punishment, especially for repeat offenders. And I don't know if you have anything to say on that, Elif, but I just found in some cases they were like 2 years, or I've even heard of people just staying for 6 months where they have actually been and then let out after 6 months on good behavior. What do you make of that?
I think it speaks to how little value, how little awareness and how little value there is in the impact that an inappropriate sexual experience can have on one psychologically. Also, I think it speaks to our society where there are certain things that are important, and if you contribute to the world in a particular way, then you matter. So if you steal money from a company, from a big corporation, you're going to get more time than than rape. It matters more. Money matters more to our society than the mental health and the well-being. We don't know how to deal with those who have dysfunction. People, addiction too. There's not enough money and resources that goes towards that. Addiction is created by a system. It's created by a system, and then the problem is on the street. And then when you're on the street as an addict, you just an eyesore and a problem to the world. So what we live in as human beings, we are part of a society that if you are you can be married and you can be a pastor taking money from the poor, and you can give it to your the girls. You can be a blesser, right? And because they can they take money home and they can take their friends out, they're the best person. But when you have nothing, you no one. And so that's, unfortunately, it speaks to who we are as people. We cannot even hold space for our own children. What I want to challenge our community, I want to ask you the question: if your son comes to you, can your son come to you? Is this even a conversation you have? I talk to my kids about everything. Nothing is off the table. Everything is teachable. I've never treated my children like, oh, you mustn't know about this and you mustn't know about the big bad wolf. I talk to them about everything, and they have the intelligence and the capacity to be able to process that and decide who they want to be. Do you have the kind of household where you can ask your child about what they're attracted to or what they like, or can't they speak to you because you're going to judge them? Because if that's the household you have, where they can only speak to strangers online and to their friends, because you only have the capacity for them you can only hold space for them if they're showing up in a way that's comfortable for you, you need to heal.
Absolutely.
If we value our own children and our neighbors and the little girls in the school, if we can't see, if we can still sympathize more with a principal or with a man because who is a CEO at a company. We respect him more than we do the child in the street. How do we expect that there's going to be any value placed on the well-being and the mental health of our children and the impact that this kind of damage does? Because it stays with you forever. And what ends up happening, we know when we experience this, it stays with us forever, but we still choose not to heal and either become part of the problem or in total denial because we just so much want to erase who we truly are. So, sorry, the scratch in my throat is because this is a very challenging conversation. But I'm here for it, and we've got to be willing to be here for it.
Absolutely.
We can talk about the sentence that's given. And you must understand, by the time a sexual predator is sentenced, there is a lot of evidence. Because our system doesn't want to waste money on us if there's no evidence to prove it. Because that person's innocent until proven guilty, and your life can be falling apart, and you can scream the story from the rooftops, and you can say it did happen, and I told my family, and I did. Your family, if your family doesn't even want to believe you, if your family doesn't even want to hold space for your trauma and for how they failed you, system's certainly not going to. So by the time someone is convicted, there is a lot of gruesome, brutal evidence. And then they get a short sentence. Can you argue that our mental health and our well-being just does not matter? When you sit in therapy with somebody that already has, like people in rehab, they're not addicts because for no reason. There is a reason behind why they're self-medicating. By the time somebody is a bully or violent or an attacker, there is a reason behind that. But we have a culture of get over it and make good choices. And then we use people like me as an example. Well, she did it and Brian did it. And I'm not taking away from that. Then there's the other argument that there are many people in terrible poverty here in South Africa that can't even eat or get to work. How are they going to get therapy? There are not enough rehabs. There are not enough social workers that are actually willing to do their job. There are not enough paid social workers. The funding that goes towards that is far too little. So what is it that we need to do? We have to be more willing to have these conversations and get involved and say, well, maybe we need to sign more petitions. Maybe we need to protest more where we don't go to work for 2 or 3 days and the entire system stops moving because we just refuse to contribute towards it. So that maybe they can start listening and actually allocating the money where it needs to go. Maybe we need to be more aware of who we are voting for and putting into positions of power. In South Africa, we've sort of given up on politics. Many of us have. There are so many people who just don't vote. Your question is an important one, but I think the answer is a culmination of many different things that need to be acknowledged. So as a spiritual guide, I can answer the question. I can offer perspective into a solution from an energetic and a spiritual perspective because I have no power in politics and I have no power in the homes of other people. I have no power in how anybody sees humanity. But what I do know is I have insight into the influence we have on the energy of our planet. And if we want the value of human life to elevate, if we want the value of a child's life to elevate, we can't keep treating our children in our homes like they're objects that just need to yield to whatever we want. We have to start investing in our relationships with them. And if it's difficult for you to see or to even imagine your child dating, you need therapy. They're human beings. They're not your objects. If it's
Mm.
difficult for you to imagine them having feelings because it's uncomfortable for you, you need some sort of support to process and work through that, because they should be able to come and talk to you about anything, and you should have the emotional and mental maturity not to say, oh, that's a sin, we don't even talk about that, you must do this, is how you do it, or otherwise you're wrong. That's just laziness. That's being mentally lazy and emotionally and spiritually lazy and immature and being self-righteous, and you are not providing your child with a safe environment. When the lives, the quality and the value of the children's lives in their household is elevated, then it'll elevate with regards to the consciousness as a collective. And I'll go so far as to say, why is it that we see that when something happens to a white child, there is more outrage, there is more being done? We can say it's because they don't care about us, but they have a different value. Not all, I don't want to generalize, but I can go so far as to say that listening to the child and seeing the child as a human, and not just a child who must be seen and not heard, and who must behave properly and do what we say because we're paying their bills, and culturally they treat their there is more of an affinity to include children in conversations in some of those households, not all. I'm going to say not all. I don't want to generalize. And we as people of color, you'll notice that too in our households now, that we're bringing that in. We're not repeating what our parents did. Our children have a place at the table now, and our children, if I see my daughter's faces, I say, why do you seem sad today? No one ever asked me that. Are you okay? What's going on? They can tell me what's happening in their dating life. They can tell me what's happening. I'm missing this. And I can think as an adult, oh my goodness, it's not a big deal. But to them, it's a big deal. And I know that. So in order for the value of the currency of our children's lives to elevate in Black and people of color's households, because I can speak from that perspective just culturally. But let's make it across the board, regardless of who we are, race, creed, nationality. We want to be able to be healthy enough as parents so that we can hold a healthy space for our children. If you're struggling with your addictions, and if you're struggling with your own trauma, and if you're struggling with codependence, and if you're addicted to having a man love you and be by you, and you know when you're healthy and when you're not, you don't need anybody else to tell you. And you're parenting children, if we want the value of our children's lives to elevate, nobody messes with my kids. I'm a single mom. Nobody disrespects my kids or messes with them. You know why? I treat my children with respect. And that doesn't mean I'm still strict, and there are still certain values that matter. I am an African mother. That's not going to change. But people can see the energy around my children. They know that I'm the kind of mother, I won't go to sleep. If you do my child wrong, I'm going to make sure you face the consequences of that, even if I'm doing it single-handedly. I confront and I hold people accountable. People know my children. They're dealing with a mother bear when it comes to me. Even when it came to dating, I didn't date when my children were little. I made it very clear to men that my children are my priority. And when I started dating, there were certain distances and they needed to know their place. So everything that happens in the 3D world is a representation of a spiritual relationship that we have. It's an energetic relationship. What is your energetic relationship with your children? If it's based on denial, fear, ignorance, they're not safe with you. Predators can see that. And the system's going to mimic who we are. The system is always going to mimic who we are.
Absolutely. I think what you said there is so powerful, Elif, because we need to create those safe spaces for our children. And hurt people hurt people. I was just
Yeah.
listening to that song yesterday. So many abusers were once abused themselves. So we just need to be mindful of that. And trauma left unhealed becomes repeated behavior. So if these cycles are not interrupted with awareness, intervention, and support, then it will perpetuate. And I love that you touched on the fact that you're an African mama.
Yes.
We know as single moms, being a single mom myself, you need to really look at, I know of many women, and I'm not casting judgment here, that bring men around to their children knowing that that person is not safe. I need to touch on that because I've seen so many different people. They have the knowledge and the intuition, the guidance system is shouting at them. And because they don't want to be left alone, they don't, they want to have someone in the arm, for example. Unfortunately, that person is introduced to the family. I just wanted to touch on some things regarding breaking the cycle of abuse and why it matters. What you said is so powerful, your relationship with your children. Early intervention prevents future harm. So just going back to the case of Brandon, he was aware of his pedophilic attractions, but chose not to act on them, and he sought help. And this is what breaking a cycle looks like for our viewers out there. It is choosing a different path, being self-aware, and you might need help in recognizing that in the beginning. Like Elif said, she is a spiritual coach, and we also offer courses which have tools to raise self-awareness. So you can check that out on Patreon. We'll leave the link below. And the second thing I want to touch on is when survivors speak up, they change generations. So when a survivor tells their story, and Elif, I'm sure you can attest to this about abuse, they seek healing through that. By speaking up, by using our voice, Elif just mentioned, this is a very, very difficult conversation because we've both lived through that, through sexual assault. So when a survivor tells their story or they report abuse, they're not just helping themselves. You need to think about this. You actually speaking up on behalf of other people that could have been harmed by that perpetrator. So it has a rippling effect. We need to stop silencing ourselves, and it takes a lot of courage. In one of our modules in our course that we're presenting, we spoke about courage and how courage can be used as such a powerful tool to speak up, to speak your truth, and to actually change the silence and the stigma surrounding this assault that you've endured. And I love what you said, Elif, about parenting with awareness. You mentioned that your children can come to you with anything. And that is so powerful because I remember as a child, I knew that there were some things I would not even raise it with my parents because it would be immediately shut down. And I love seeing, the coin being flipped. Now I'm a parent myself. And the door is always, always open. Because what I've noticed is when one parent heals, their children grow up safer.
Yes.
There's that legacy works because there's such an awareness. There's so many healthy boundaries. No, my mom told me this is not acceptable behavior. There's that immediate awareness. So we can see how parenting with awareness creates safer homes. And I remember one of the themes that I grew up with is charity begins at home. So when we start having these conversations at home, we start creating these safe spaces within our homes. And like on this podcast here, having those difficult conversations is so important in opening the door to having those difficult conversations. Rehabilitation is offered in some communities, and that is I'm talking about perpetrators being rehabilitated. But I also wanted to touch on if perpetrators are being rehabilitated, the support systems that are offered, it varies from country to country. But even here in New Zealand, I saw that there is definitely, there's not a lot of support to victims. And we're hoping to change that, guys, by having these conversations, by creating a community where there is support available, where you can actually, if you have experienced an assault by a pedophile, you can write to us. We have an email which is listed below. Please share your stories with us so that you can heal or start to heal. And like I said, our Patreon link is also available. Elif, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to say that nobody comes into this world with the purpose or the mission to disrupt and to harm others. Despite what we've been, there is no such thing as absolute evil. No soul comes here with the mission to ruin other people's lives. Every soul wants to give space to their evolution and be the best version of themselves. And we do the best that we can with the tools that we have. So we choose our tribe, we choose our parents, we choose our community, we choose our friends, because so that they can support us on this mission to give space to the best version of who we are. But in order to truly love someone, you need to be willing to acknowledge that we all have shadows. If you only want to see my best, if you only want me in my best, if you only want to acknowledge that I'm this great, I always say, depending on how you meet me, I'm going to be a saint or I'm going to be the meanest bitch you've ever come across. And that just depends on what the frequency you meet me on, you know. If I see you, if I think you're bullying someone or you're being mean, you're gonna get the meanest version of me, and you're gonna be like, oh my goodness, that, you know. And that will be the story you tell forevermore. I'm honest about my shadows. I'm honest, and that's the only way I can give space to truly give space to the best of who I am and offer that to anyone. So this is what health means. Being healthy means embracing the fullness of who you are. And there are some people in our communities and societies who don't have that space. Whether it's the victim who's experienced something awful at the hands of someone who is distorted and unhealthy and shows up as the monster in their story, or whether it is the person battling with their demons who was ashamed and trying to suppress, and they blame the world for feeling some kind of way, and then they start acting out. We're all connected. And the more of us who decide to become aware and to heal and to learn the tools, techniques, the processes to become a part of the solution, the better. So I do want to encourage you guys to subscribe to A Course in Recovery, where we develop a culture of that normalizes recovery, where we're not just wanting to get over things and wanting to show everyone how perfect we are, so we're masking all the time and pretending. What is it that we need to know? And so that's really important for me to highlight and to point out to you that is a resource. It's an online support group that we offer, where we counsel and we coach and we teach. And then, as I've said earlier on, I want to leave you with this. Can you sit down and do you have the kind of relationship with your son where you can say, do you find that person attractive, and they're not going to seize up inside because they're afraid they're going to be persecuted? Because I'll speak to my son. Do you like, he's open with me about his sexual orientation, and we discuss things, and everything is a teachable moment. And there is nothing that is taboo in my home. Because I know that my kids are incredible to me. These are people's children, you know, and they're a part of our community. So I hope that this conversation has been eye-opening. And then I want to ask you, this is my final question in closing, because I'm going back to the fact that Brian has this arrangement. I want to ask you, Ruth, can you imagine being married to someone for a couple of years? He's a really nice guy. He's great. He's a great father. You can feel something because as women, like when your guy's not really that attracted to you, he's not really that interested in sex. And some women would freak out, like, why is he always pleasing himself? He doesn't seem that interested in me. What do you think your response would be? How do you think you'd feel about your partner telling you that? He's not ever done anything harmful. Am I putting you on the spot?
No, not at all. Look, I've certainly heard of a lot of lavender marriages, in my day growing up, and where people have different sexual orientation, but they've conformed to the norms of society. And it wasn't frowned upon, you would have an uncle, ooh, he's totally in his feminine, as our elders would describe. But yeah, if I was in that situation, I cannot say that I would find any faults, It depends, like I said earlier on, it's a conscious choice. So if you are happy with such an arrangement, it's, relationships are really about what makes you happy. And if you find fulfillment in that, it might not look like the norm that society ascribes to, but if it makes you truly happy and you find fulfillment in that relationship, and that person makes you happy and continues to bring happiness, and then who's to say why not? If it works for you, then. But from a personal perspective, I would, I would have to have a tough conversation about how we move forward on that. But I just want to go back to what you said about no soul comes here to harm another. That was so powerful. Thank you for that. I know that when pain is left alone, when it's unhealed, it can take root and it causes deep harm to not only to yourself but to others as well. And the truth is, we all carry stories, some that might be hard and some that might need to heal. We can't undo what has been done to us. We have personal experience with that, but we can choose how to move forward. So through open dialogue like we had today, through accountability, through awareness, Brandon is such an amazing stewardess of that awareness. He has so much emotional intelligence. We can begin to create safer homes, like safer schools and safer community. And our children, like Elif was saying about her son, they actually hold the mirror to who we truly are. Because as they grow, we heal. And I've seen it time and time again with my daughter. Whether sometimes you have to bite your tongue, and just before you respond, you need to become self-aware of what am I feeling in this moment. I have a choice to either respond as my parents did, or I can choose another route. The innocence reminds me of that is something worth protecting, and the presence alone invites us as parents to become better. Let's be part of the solution, guys, by having these hard conversations. And as Elif mentioned, we do have a course on recovery. So go and check out our Patreon link. And until next time, stay conscious, stay kind, and stay connected, guys. Elif, did you want to add anything?
I think that's perfect, Ruth. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you guys for being here with us. We look forward to seeing your comments in the comment section and to see you guys in the course. So do join that. Share with your friends, your family. We can all do with the support and with the space to heal and grow. So until next time, take care.